G'day everyone. I can see there's a couple people coming in. It's just slowing up now, but looks like it's sort of teetered off, so we might get started. Don't punish people who are on time. Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for registering. So super keen for this session today. So it's another episode in our series just to share what chief remote pilots and different organizations are doing with drones. Something our team's been working with Rob and the team at Flinders Uni for a while now, and it's compared to some of the commercial situations that we help with. This is some pretty unique use cases and some really cool, I guess, research applications that Rob and his team are involved with. We work with a number of different universities, and so we thought we had a few requests about some more unique capabilities. So I thought, who better else than bring Rob in to share a bit about his drone program, his experience, what he's got planned for the future. So hopefully share a bit of insight and just keep building this community to try and share lessons learned and keep talking everything about drones. So I'm saying there we'll kick straight off. So I'll jump across and I'd like to welcome Rob. So thanks, mate, for popping in. I won't butcher it. I'll let you do the introduction to yourself. So maybe tell the team a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Alex. Yeah, thanks for that. I'm GIS specialist in the geospatial unit at Flinders University and carry the role of chief pilot. So just looking at the slides there, I came to Flinders in 91 originally as a mature age student and finished up with a degree in geography. And I guess for me, timing was everything. As I was finishing my degree, the GIS world started to grow rapidly. The state government were putting in GIS and needed support. So I fairly quickly picked up some work as a researcher and the GIS side of things. And I guess for the first 8-9 years, I was predominantly a researcher or research assistant or associate or whatever you want to call them on different projects. Some I drove myself, some were driven by other academics. And then around 2003, the university realized that there was a need for technical support for the GIS system. It was becoming far more complex. There was a lot more in it. So I started working part-time to support the university system as a whole and slowly reduced my research side, although I was, of course, continuing to support the researchers. And then over time, it sort of became a full-time position, just managing systems. And it would have been probably around 2015, 2016, we started to see drone technology become a part of the research world. So 2016, I was flying little drones. 2017, I went and got my full REPL. That allowed me to move into the larger drones. And at that stage, there was drone usage from a variety of areas across the university. And I found that using drones gave me extra information I wasn't always collecting in the field. So I did a lot of field work in my earlier days. And the idea of being able to throw a drone up in the air and get a current aerial image was really our first start. It meant that when we missed things, we could go back and get the information without having to go back in the field necessarily. So that was sort of the driving side of my starting to use drones. And where my passion came from was, I guess, my geography.
Yeah, I was going to say we caught up recently. You're saying the research side of things is where your passion comes into it, and it sounds like sort of drones give that extra bit of a boost. So obviously more data and sort of more details at a high level. So that's sort of driven most of this. That's fantastic. Awesome. So moving on to, I guess, the Flinders Uni. You've been there for a fair while now and sort of pretty
Yep.
instrumental with getting their program set up. And obviously, I know as the chief remote pilot, you oversee it all today. But curious to see, I guess, for them, yeah, how they started. What was the, I guess, initial use cases? Sound like a bit of aerial data for some of the research projects. And maybe, yeah, could you give us a bit insight of what that journey's looked like?
Yep. So by the time we got to around 2019, I guess, we had usage from a whole variety of different areas. So certainly the geography and the GIS side of things had a big use for it. But we were finding that people in archaeology were using drones for a very similar purpose. Also, the engineering people were starting to get into drones more from the autonomous control side of things, but they were starting to see drones as a value for them. Along with our media studies people who were using drones for doing aerial film shooting and stuff like that. So with a variety of different areas across the university having use in drones, we formed a small group to try and work out how we can better support drones within the university rather than working in our little autonomous groups. And we were hoping that we'd be able to gain more traction by being a little more organised. So it took us a little while. In 2020, we were able to convince the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research to give us some money to get more people qualified as drone pilots. And I think we had about half a dozen people go off and do their drone licence then. Of course, once they had their drone licence, we then argued that we needed a REOC in order to be able to take advantage of the licenses.
Yep.
And again, we were able to get the DVC of Research to be able to provide us the funding we needed to put our REOC in. Of course, like most large organisations, there was a lot of debate on who the chief pilot should be and where it should reside and that sort of thing. It very quickly became apparent that it was best not to have an academic running the drone stuff because academics have got their own focus. So we realised that it needed to come from the professional staff side of things. We approached the WHS group expecting them to see the value, but they didn't. So as the technical person for geospatial, we were obviously the largest user of drone technologies. I ended up as the chief pilot. So it wasn't something I sought, it was something that was thrust upon me. I didn't need any extra work than I had already, but the value of using drones going forward was just too obvious for it to be neglected.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to say, and you were sort of saying now there's, was it 50 pilots now, give or take? Is in
so
all?
We've got 52 pilots.
Yep.
Across the university. 22 of those have repels. So we've still got a reasonably sizable contingent that fly in the excluded bracket, where they're just looking for some aerial imagery or some very basic 3D modelling, where we don't need to put up a big drone to achieve that result. Predominantly, that'll be final year undergraduate students or honours students, people like that, who want to dabble but aren't necessarily at the point of spending the money to go off and get a full license. So the model, as we sort of slowly built it up, was more of a distributed model rather than a central model. So a lot of organisations in universities will use either external REOCs, where they work with a third party and fly under their REOC, or they form a unit specifically for drone usage, which means that everybody has to come to them to fly a drone. We took a different tact in that I didn't want to have to fly everybody's missions, and we didn't want to have some sort of a group that needed to turn over sufficient funding in order to cover its costs, especially staff costings. And by doing that, we've been able to avoid a high cost model for the researchers. So we run a whole series of inductions on different sensors and different types of drones. And our aim is to have as many people trained to do their own data collection as possible. The drone flying takes a bit of practice depending on what you're using. So LiDAR, for example, takes quite a bit of time to learn how to get decent data, and even more time to work out how to process that data. So we run a bit of a hybrid in that researchers can hire pilots on an hourly basis and have their data processed on an hourly basis, or they can do it themselves. So depending on the level of funding they've got, it's not excluding them from operating in the drone world simply because they don't have large grants to work from.
Yes, yeah, I remember you saying that it was having the internal system. Like there's probably enough use cases now that can sort of warrant the internal processing, and then having yourself at the top, the pilots sort of underneath you, and then the smaller XCAT pilots that they can either do it themselves if it's a low category, or if it's that more advanced stuff.
That's right.
Contracting you guys.
Approving of even going through the approval process for excluded. So we've got a university policy. I worked with a couple of the other technical people to put a university policy together. And the areas that are big users are the science and engineering group, which I'm a part of, the human arts and social sciences college, which is predominantly the videographers or media study people, and the archaeology people. And we allow the technical, after training, to do their own in-house approvals for the excluded bracket. They know we don't have any self-approving. So the researchers have to go to their professional staff or their technical support people to get approval to fly their drone. That avoids any issues we're going to run into with CASA going, well, hang on, you've breached. Same with WHS. You know, our technical staff are responsible for the WHS across the university, and it only made sense to treat this the same way as WHS.
Absolutely.
Because CASA can be pretty tight on their rules. And as someone who imposes those, I see the reason why, but not everybody does. Some people get annoyed, but they're the rules and we make sure they comply.
I was going to say, because I think having the CASA side of things, but then also your internal inductions and getting people, just even those XCAT levels, getting them across it, because it's a different use case to the commercial world. And I think, getting that REOC, having the CEO as your nominee, but for you guys, obviously a little bit different. So there's different controls around keeping all that neat and tidy.
So we've embedded it in our field trip. So anytime we do a field trip, then people need to do a field trip form as part of the WHS requirement. So there's a question in there: are you going to be flying drones? If their answer is yes, then they've got to come back either with a JSA from their technical person if they're flying excluded, or their approval from Fly Freely if they're flying under the REOC.
Gotcha.
And they're not allowed to move on that until they've got approval.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. That adds that extra layer, as you said, for CASA. And if someone comes knocking, you've sort of got everything in sort of one place. So great. Awesome. So probably brings us to the next one, I guess. Can you explain, I guess, what Flinders Uni has gained by building an in-house drone program? You mentioned before having that internal processing instead of outsourcing individually and probably costing more. Having that internal little conveyor belt of jobs in, jobs out makes it a bit easier. Yeah.
So where organizations either have a drone unit that do all the drone flying and processing, or they're using external, there's a high cost that comes with that. And it's usually in the thousands of dollars to have a drone flight undertaken. Whereas for us, if you're flying under the REOC with one of the big drones that's supported by the university itself, then you pay a $400 mission charge. So a mission can be a whole day or several days of flying. So it's not per flight, it's per mission. A lot of the researchers, after using our drone, have then gone out and purchased their own drones, and they don't pay because they're covering their own maintenance. And that $400 really just covers replacement of props, battery replacement, any maintenance that needs to be done on the drones and those sorts of things. One of the advantages we got was we lobbied the university with the number of drones that were coming in, that they covered their drones under the university-wide insurance policy. So that was a big win for us.
Mm-hmm.
We were having to pay out about $8,000 a year just to keep a drone in the air, just for the insurance. So by moving them central, in fact, the last one that we bought, the bathymetric, cost us about $18,000 for 12 months of insurance.
Wow.
So by moving that and having Central cover that as part of a large organisation, it works out cheaper for the university overall, but it means that we've offset that cost and the researchers don't need to do it. We also use the drones in teaching as well. So we have a topic on how to process drone data in our GIS and surveying degrees.
Mm.
So the students learn about mission planning, flight planning, processing data, whether it be photogrammetric or LiDAR data, as part of their training in their GIS or their surveying degree. So in the geospatial, we do both surveying and the GIS side. So we include that as part of their degree. And whenever, of course, we go on a field camp, the first thing we do is throw a drone up in the air, so we've got an aerial image to work from. So the students really quickly gain the appreciation of having relevant data, rather than, in some of the regional areas where we might be camping, it might have been 10, 15, even 20 years since it was flown last. So having data relevant means that it's much easier for the students to appreciate the value of using RPAs.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, definitely, that's awesome to hear, because it definitely is a practical application for the students when they step into the commercial world of surveying. I say that's probably the most common users that we see, and having that ability of, when to use a drone, why would you use a drone, what do you want to collect, why do you want to collect it, and then that processing back end, if they can sort of be prepped on that before entering the commercial world, like that's got to pay massive dividends. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So Flinders has only recently taken on the surveying, but we've always been very closely linked into industry in the geospatial in South Australia, and we've gained a lot of support from them, and they recognise the value of having well-trained students coming out of university rather than having to retrain them when they get them. We design our courses to meet the needs of industry going forward, and like most things, our students are going to be 3 or 4 years before they actually hit. So we look at latest technologies, what's new, what's coming up, and we try and have the students as up to date as we can when they walk out of the university. We've had quite a few industry comment on the fact they like our students because they'll come in and actually teach them a thing or two. Because they're not, it's hard for an industry to stay up to date. If you're busy working in the field, keeping up to date can be a hard task. So
absolutely,
it's an extra bow for our students when they come up.
And see, having those particularly those unique use cases, having I guess the graduate for them sort of come in with that knowledge is super valuable. Great. I was going to say, speaking of those unique cases, I know we've spoken a couple of times about a few of the use cases you guys use, but Keane, I know the bathymetric operations that you guys use, but I'd love to hear if there's a couple of those use cases that are quite unique to what you do, and maybe some of the research projects that you've been working on.
So just to give you an idea of the growth we've had, in 2022, we did 22 missions under our REOC. Last year, we did 54 missions under the REOC. And we expect that to grow probably by 20 odd missions again this year. And part of that growth is by collectively getting grants and money that we need in order to put more sensors onto the drone. So the bathymetric sensor came as part of a link ARC link grant with Department of Environment and Water in South Australia, SA Water, along with Deakin and Monash universities. We all put money together to come up with the baseline money that we needed. And then we got an ARC linkage grant to cover the rest. So that was a new acquisition at the end of last year. We've already done a couple of missions with it. We're still ironing out the bugs, so to speak. But part of the process, as my role as chief pilot, is to exactly do that. Go out, take new equipment, run some test flights in a variety of different environments, work through the process of how to process the data, and then I'll put videos together and those sorts of things to support the researchers. And we have inductions for pretty much every instrument. So we run, for the REPL pilots, we run, their first induction is a fly freely induction. So they know how the system works, what's expected of them before they go out and fly. Part of the requirement from CASA is that they have to show a competency in drone flying. So that's their second component of their induction, is to go through, and although they've got their license, like most of us, when we start, we're a bit hesitant, can be a little bit frightening to put a big drone in the air. That it's all right when you're doing it with another company's money, but when you're doing it with equipment that you know is going to be relied on the next week by someone else, it gets a little bit frightening, especially with bathymetric, where you're going out over water. That's a bit scary too, because if it comes down, there's no collecting it afterwards. It's drowns and it's gone. We originally purchased a TrueView LiDAR initially, and we were able to show the value of using LiDAR data. That's only terrestrial, mind you. The value of using LiDAR data, which gave us then the support to go for the bathymetric. So the process has been, even if we get in at the bottom level, show the value and then explain how much better it can be when we spend more money to get bigger instruments. And that seems to have worked for us. I was just going through earlier on the types of stuff, projects that we've done. And besides the field camp work, we've done heritage mapping, archaeological sites, landscape reconstruction from the social sciences side of things, or humanities. On the science side of things, we do coastal monitoring along the Coorong. So we've been monitoring sand dunes down there since 2017, when we first started into the drone side of things. Now we can use the LiDAR and get much better measurements, and we can do a much better job than what we were doing just off of the little Phantoms or the Mavic Pros. By getting a thermal drone, so that was one of the steps along the way, was getting a drone that had thermal capabilities. That brought in the biological sciences and the ecological sciences side of things, biodiversity. So we've got a PhD student who's been working on KI, looking at the koalas and their koala movements and behavior. We've got marine science students who've been monitoring things like whales. So with whales, their blowhole is an indicator of health. So by using the thermal camera, they are able to have a look at the health of the whales And that was done in conjunction with SeaWorld up in Queensland by one of our PhD who initially did it with her honours and then went on to do a PhD in it. We've been using it for monitoring regrowth in Kangaroo Island. So one of our PhD students who graduated last year was using the drones to monitor the regrowth on Kangaroo Island. So there was a big fire through Kangaroo Island, which wiped out a large amount of forests. And we've been using it to monitor the regrowth and watching where it does regrow and where it doesn't, looking at environmental factors that support that. We've been using it to do evapotranspiration along the Murray up near Loxton Berry area. We've had a team up there using a combination of LiDAR and thermal to start to look at calculations of evapotranspiration on the mudflats up there. And it just happened to be convenient for us. We had a flood through the Murray River a little while ago, so we also had a look at the flood extent, and we were able to use LiDAR data and have a look at and do calculations on how much water there was flowing over the mud plains. And then post-flood, we were able to then use the LiDAR to look at how much deposition of silt had built up on the mud flats or where it had disappeared as a result of the flood coming through. So that was an interesting study. We've also got a couple of academics who study forestry. Mm-hmm. So we did some test runs with the LiDAR to look at biomass in forests, along with Forest SA, who manage the forests here in South Australia. They're now moving through to have a look using imagery and remote sensing technology or techniques to identify dieback and those sorts of things within forests. So fantastic. That's a combination of machine learning and AI development along with that. With the bathymetric stuff, we're working in conjunction with Department of Environment and Water in South Australia, looking at our coastal areas. So coastal erosion is a big deal, especially along the Metro Coast. We have a lot of sand movement, and they do dredging and sand transport and stuff like that in order to maintain the beaches. So Department of Environment and Water have been doing transects across the coast along South Australian coast for many years. And it's a very long and time-consuming process. So the first cab off the ranks was to see if we can use the bathymetric LiDAR to replace manual data collection processes. So can we send the drone out over the water and still capture the information, and how accurate is the bathymetric stuff to the RTK collected data. So we've got an honours student working with them to start to develop that. Another use for the bathymetric LiDAR, which we flew just a couple of weeks ago, Fugro is a hydrographic surveying company in South Australia. They work right across Australia, and I think they do some international stuff as well. And they did a bathymetric survey along down near Robe, which is down near the Coorong. And there's certain areas they weren't able to collect because it was too close to the beach or those sorts of things. So we've took the bathymetric LiDAR down there and we flew over the areas that they missed, and we were able to do infill to supplement the data that they collected from their plane or from their boat. So they do a lot off of the boat, and of course boats can't travel over reefs, so that caused a bit of problems. So we had areas where there's reef that they weren't able to collect data, so we've worked on filling the gap for that.
Awesome.
We've got one with the thermal working up in the Kimberleys, looking at the floodplains and having a look to see if using thermal technologies, we can start to look at fault line interactions and those sorts of things.
Awesome.
Our next venture coming up is looking at blue carbon. So we've got St Kilda Mangroves here in Adelaide, and we've got a team of biodiversity people that have been working down there and looking at how carbon sequestration can happen through the mangrove areas. But of course, we need good quality data. So we'll be looking at using the bathymetric LiDAR down there to assess water depth and things like that, which has an impact upon the ability for it to uptake carbon. So because of the model we use, we've got a large variety of different uses and applications. And that's been really advantageous for our students, because it doesn't matter what bent our students have got, there's a project we can plug them into.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic. That's I was going to say there's heaps more there. We'll go into, I think, the just cautious of time. We've got about a couple of minutes and then maybe some questions at the end, but that was fantastic. It's always good to put some use cases and pictures to some of the work you guys are doing. So I think we'll go, I think we covered this a little bit. So we spoke a little bit about the XCAT versus the REOC. So I might just jump ahead to the next one. So I guess maybe if there's people, maybe universities who are starting or partway through their journey, I know you guys are pretty advanced in these sort of areas. Do you have any sort of advice from the beginning that you sort of wish you'd done, or any sort of recommendations people starting their drone program for some of the unis, or just in general, I guess?
I think the biggest thing for us was getting support at the top from the university. Often what happens is you work within your own faculty or college or whatever you want to call them in your university, and trying to fund high cost, and drones are high cost, we can't get around that, at an individual level or within a discipline level or faculty level is not an easy task. So by bringing in now, and we had a very sympathetic Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research, who, after the first meeting we had with him, saw the advantages of drone technology and was prepared to support us. It didn't cost the uni that much. You know, a REOC is not hugely expensive, but someone's got to cover the cost. And we, for a number of years, got small grants through, which allowed us to get pilots trained. So pilot training, you know, we need to work in the 25 kilo, or up to 25 kilo. And you're looking at between $2,000 and $3,000 for each pilot to be trained. So getting support from our professional development group, along with our research or DVC of research, has made it suitable for us, or made it such that we can do it. So my advice would be to get as much support from as high as you can. They've always got a bigger bucket than what we do at the coalface. And, you know, the workload is high for a chief pilot if you're not well organised. And that's where Fly Freely have come in. Fly Freely is easy to use. You know, we looked at a number of different options when we were putting it together, and we found that Fly Freely was the one that worked for us. It was simple. You could do simple, but you could also go complex. And as it's developed over the last few years, the ability to start to differentiate who can fly what and where and that sort of thing, it's become invaluable from my perspective as chief pilot. And the infield app means that I can see almost in real time what's going on. When people are out there flying, I can see they're out there flying. When they finish their flight, I can see that they've completed. With our maintenance, I don't do our maintenance. We have our own engineering section who do and take care of the drone maintenance. So they are part of the system as well. He can see when a drone is not serviceable anymore. and immediately we start to put things into action. He can keep all the records in the Fly Freely system, which makes our job much easier. I'd hate to have to do both the maintenance and the chief pilot role, which is often what happens.
Absolutely. No,
So
that's
again,
fantastic.
getting cooperation across the university was key for us.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I think, yeah, having a lot of times, particularly when people starting, having that CRP and the maintenance together. So that's fantastic. The engineering guys can help you out there, particularly the amount of
Yep.
drones you guys got going. Because, yeah, for CASA and also for functionality reasons, making sure that maintenance is sort of upheld is super key. So,
Yep. So whenever we get a new drone, the first thing we do is send it across to our technical services unit. They've got both mechanical and electronic engineers. They go over it to make sure it's in good condition before we start. And that's their opportunity to collect serial numbers and things like that.
Fantastic. Awesome. Dane, thank you very much for the kind words on Fly Freely. I think you just covered the next question anyway, so we'll jump we'll jump to the next one. Awesome. So probably just rounding out the last question. We got some other questions that have come in from the audience, but I might just I guess looking forward into the future of this year and next year. It's always hard to look more than 12 months into the future, but is there anything sort of planned of yeah, what the future looks like for you guys? I know you mentioned on the phone recently have had 7 years of collecting data and spatial in certain areas. So even having that overlap or time lapse data is sort of pretty valuable enough. But yeah, sort of curious to see what's on the agenda moving forward.
So as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at a night vision drone to help support our biodiversity and biological students. We're also looking at a hyperspectral. So we're looking at being able to take it to the next level. So we're approaching the DVC for some money to get a hyperspectral drone that'll give us the ability to start to differentiate species, look at soils, a whole variety of things. I mean, most people know what hyperspectral can do. And again, we're looking at getting in at the grass level. So yes, there's some pretty expensive systems out there, but getting funding is never an easy task. So we're looking at an entry level. Once we've proven the value of the entry level, we'll be then again looking at ARC, leaf and linkage grants and those sorts of things to upgrade to some of the higher value, more survey spec type instruments. We also have a collaboration with Airborne Research Australia out at Parafield. So we've been working with them for many years before we even got into drones, and they do support airborne data collection for remote sensing people, predominantly for research. So it's been useful picking their brains about some of the bits and pieces that have stumped us a little, and they've helped us develop some of the methodologies that we now implement as part of the process.
Awesome.
But it's it's building better training and better induction processes for the instrumentation, which I think will help us move forward. But we've got, at the moment, I think I've got about 7 people standing by to do their repulls. So there's more projects, and we're sort of now a couple of years in from having our REOC, so the grants are now starting to roll in, because it can take a long time to get a grant through people like ARC and those types of things. So they are all now starting to roll in. So that's why I sort of expect we'll probably have about a 30 or 40% growth this year. And I expect that to continue probably for the next 3 or 4 years.
Fantastic. Great. All right. Well, a few more questions, but I think I might just jump straight to the audience questions whilst we're somewhat still in time. So no, thanks, mate. That was incredibly helpful. I'll see. It looks like we've got 2 have come through so far, but if anyone else has any questions on the call, we got about 5-10 minutes to go. So if you don't mind, Rob might just ask some of these. So
Yep.
so we've got one from Claire. So it's more of a statement, I think, than a question. But Claire said, "Are the koalas in the treetop videos your most favorite videos, favorite data videos to collect?"
Yeah.
And you know they are really with an exclamation mark. So have you got any thoughts
Yes.
on that? Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome,
Claire's our PhD student who's been working on Kangaroo Island.
awesome.
There's now a swag of more koala research about to kick off as a result of the work that she's done. And yes, the videos are cool.
Nice one,
Might
nice.
not be useful for data, but gee, they look good.
It's always fun to do with drones up there. That's fantastic. Great. And they got one from Dinesh saying, "Hi guys, if someone wants to come into a CRP role, what kind of topics are asked at the CASA telephone assessment, and what topics should they do to prepare for the interview?"
So I did the chief pilot training. That a lot of it is about law, air law, which is probably the driest topic and subject I've ever had to deal with. It's understanding part 101 to the nth degree.
Mm-hmm.
And when you sit the exam, it's a bit daunting initially. They give you a scenario and you've got to deal with it as if you were the chief pilot and work out what's needed in the JSA and those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't find it too difficult when I came to do it. I think I was more worried about it beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
Once I started down that track, I went, oh, okay, that all makes sense. I've learned all about this. I think the most difficult thing as a chief pilot is keeping up with the instruments and the changes that are coming through from CASA. There's
Mm-hmm.
been a lot of rule changes over the last few years,
Mm-hmm.
and keeping up with all that is not easy, but air law never is.
I was going to say it can get quite complex. If it is Dinesh, had any other questions, feel free to shoot it. Our CRP, who's our support person on our on Fly Freely, can help with that process as well. So he does a bit of a reorg pathways.
Yeah.
So if that's interested, feel free to reach out, and I'm sure the guys can help with that one. We have another one here. Claire said smarter data, so I like
Yeah.
I'm loving the excitement. I think there's one here. So is your data, which Katie said, is your data available for public to view?
Most of it is tied up for research projects. So until most academics prefer not to make their data available until they've done their own publications. So there is a little bit of data available, but for the most part, it's tied up with the researchers. So it would come down to the individual researchers as to whether they're prepared to make it available. We are big Esri users, so we tend to use our portal. We've got both an on-campus and an online portal, which allows us to put our data up and share it across organisation where we've got multiple organisations that need access to the data. That becomes a much easier way of sharing it than trying to deal through drop boxes and stuff like that. And any updates that occur are automatically shared directly. So a good online system is quite helpful when it comes to sharing data. But certainly, if people want to reach out, I've probably got sample data I can share. I know when we were looking at instrumentation, being able to get hold of some sample data is extremely useful to see, especially with LiDAR, what's the scatter on the ground. And how useful is it? And that's what we based our purchase on.
Perfect. Great. Cool. We've got one from Swami here who said, I joined a bit late, but have you done any drone image capturing the infrastructure related to inspection, specifically bridge inspections to level 2 of AS 5001? Did you create 3D models from point clouds or use AI in any of these if you've done them?
So not bridge inspections as such. We've used the drones to do solar panel inspections. So we have, the university is very keen on being environmentally sustainable. We've got our own solar farm, and for the most part, we are power neutral. So we're able to maintain most of the university systems just off of our own solar panels on all the buildings and things like that. And it becomes quite expensive if you need to bring commercial people in to manage that. I imagine that as we move further into the surveying degree, we're going to be doing more things like bridge inspection processes and that sort of stuff. This is only our first year, so the students are only at most second year students. That side of things will come in sometime over the next year or two, probably in their fourth year. So we will be going that way, but we're not there yet.
Awesome, awesome. Great. I think we've got one last one which should wrap us up. So we've got one here saying, do you use Esri drone to map at all? And if so, do you recommend?
Photogrammetric processing is the vein of my life. So we have multitude of products we use, and depending on the job as to which one we will use. So drone to map is quite useful, especially for things like students. It comes as part of our site license, so we can hand out licenses quite easily, and it helps them understand the process. It doesn't work quite so well on water, those sorts of things. It seems to have a lot of trouble with. We also use Pix4D for teaching. We've got Agisoft from Metashape. We've got Trimble Business Centre Photogrammetric Suite and Point Cloud Suite, and we also have Envy. So we've got a variety of different products. Then, of course, there's all the specific product level software. So for the LiDAR, for the TrueView LiDAR, we use LP360 to deal with that, and that uses Metashape or Agisoft in the background to do the image processing. We sometimes find that when you've got a lot of trees and stuff like that, it can be quite difficult to get photogrammetric data working well. So we might end up running the same thing through multiple different ones until we get the result that we expect.
Awesome, awesome.
I hope that answers that.
No, it does. That's great. That's heaps. Great. And one more has come through. I think we might just leave this to the last one because we've gone over time. But we got here from Stephen. Do you have a set currency model for pilots? Example, three flights every 3 months or something similar?
No. When in research, it doesn't quite work that easily. So we have pilots who will do a swag of flying, and then they might not fly again for a year. But I do impose an annual competency testing. So I need to see them fly at least once a year. And until they've done that flight, they can't fly until they've cleared that. Certain pilots that fly all the time, I don't have a big problem with because they're always flying. It's the ones that are sporadic that might not fly for 9 months or so. And most of them are pretty astute. They go, well, do you have someone we can hire? And the college implemented a co-contribution model a few years back. So if they decide they want to use one of the professional staff, it's only going to cost them $80 an hour. So it's not a huge expense. And a lot of them go, well, actually, it's better to pay them because they do it regularly than do it myself. But yeah, if they haven't flown for a while, then I require that they fly. We've got an induction process. And part of that is a test at the end, not quite as rigorous as your pilot test, but we still make them fly squares and diagonals, and as long as they can show drone control, we're happy to keep them going.
Great. So once a year, but yeah, that whole in-house model makes a lot of sense. You can sort of lean on someone else, worst case. But Great. Well, thanks, mate. I really appreciate the time. It's always awesome to hear what you guys are up to, and I know you got a lot of really cool stuff planned for the future. So
Yep,
we've got a few people still left on the line, but we've gone over. So appreciate the time once again. I know you're very busy, and I'm sure everyone else on the call today appreciates it too. So thanks again. And
no
I think
worries.
your LinkedIn link was there. That's probably, I'm not sure if that's the best way to reach out to you, or if any other
Yep,
contact if someone has questions. But
yep, LinkedIn's probably the best way.
perfect. Great. Well, I'll leave it there in the chat, and I'll send it out afterwards for anyone who wants any more questions. But anyone, any question about Fly Freely, please feel free to reach out. And thanks everyone for coming along.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Rob.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, mate.